Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining for the webinar today presented by EVmatch. The webinar is titled Electric Vehicle Charging at Apartments and Condos, How to Get Your HOA or Property Owner on Board. We're going to give folks just a couple more minutes to join. In the meantime, feel free to answer our poll question down at the bottom. My name is William Truesdell, and I'll be the MC today. I'll introduce myself a little bit more shortly. As we give folks a little bit more time, I also wanted to point you toward the Ask a Question button at the bottom. So if you have any questions or comments, please enter them, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end to discuss all of that. All right, so just a couple more minutes here. Hang tight. All right, looks like we've had a few more folks join, so we're going to get started. All right, so today we are going to go ahead and cover a few things. So here's our agenda. We'll do some speaker introductions, and then we're going to kind of go through the problem of EV charging at apartments and condos as it exists today, and then talk about EVmatch's affordable and scalable solution to solving that problem. And then we're going to talk about ways you can convince or persuade your HOA, condo association, or property manager to add charging. So we'll go through some best practices that we've learned from some of our customers. Then we'll also hear from Alex Hassan, who is the CEO of Charlie Charging. And that is a great opportunity to learn more about owning and operating and maintaining charging solution that's available to you. And we collaborate with Charlie Charging as well. So it's a great opportunity. And then we'll do some Q&A after I go over some resources. So again, try to get your questions in there as we move along. Everyone is muted, so you'll just hear from the presenters, and then we'll take the questions at the end and answer as many as possible. So to kick it off, my name is William Truesdell. I do sales and marketing here at EVmatch. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, so have a decent amount of EV charging and electric vehicle industry expertise. I live in Colorado, and I went to CU Boulder. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Alex Hassan to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Hassan, and I am the founder and CEO of Charlie Charging. I am very excited to be here. Thank you so much to EVmatch for inviting me to present on this webinar, and also for organizing these incredibly helpful, resourceful webinar sessions for anyone to learn how to install a charging station. And I'm a proud owner of a Chevy Volt, which you can see pictured here in front of you, as well as Bernie the Lab. He is our unofficial mascot, and he makes it into a lot of our media. And Charlie provides turnkey electric vehicle charging services for properties of all shapes and sizes to be able to install and operate EV charging solution or EV charging stations in any way that is best fit for your property. So I'm excited to be here to educate and help however I can.
Hello there, everyone. My name is Danny Edelson. Excited to be here. I'm excited for this topic in the webinar. I work on the product side here at EVmatch, so I help design this grouping functionality that's works really well with multifamily housing that we're going to share a little bit with you today. A little bit on my background. I have a master's degree in environmental science and management from the Bren School at UCSB in Santa Barbara. I'm still based out of Santa Barbara, and so I wanted to share that the term for it that we use is a garage orphan. So I live in an apartment building here in Santa Barbara, so I don't have any access to charging at home. So I'm well familiar with the issues that people face trying to get access to charging if you live in an apartment building or a condo complex or something like that. So yeah, I'm excited to share the solution that we've come up with here at EVmatch to help people get better access to charging. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Danny. William here again. I'm going to kick it off with the presentation. So we've got this this nice image of a low battery warning. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that for their phone, but it's obviously not ideal for vehicles. And as we know, the data is clear. We need to increase the number of charging stations in order to spur more EV growth and larger EV adoption. And today, fortunately, most EV drivers have the luxury of home charging. It's just the given segment of who's been able to purchase the vehicle so far. So it's easy to solve this low battery problem for folks with that home charging. In fact, more than 80% of all EV charging currently happens at home. And it doesn't get any easier than pulling into your driveway at the end of the day, plugging in, and waking up refreshed and ready with a fully charged battery. It's even easier and cheaper than going to the gas station. So the problem is, what if you live in one of these? And more than 40% of Americans rent or live in apartments, condos, or some other type of multi-unit dwelling. And the vast majority of these, as you know, are not equipped with charging infrastructure. And I do want to emphasize how big of a problem this is. Right now, 40 million Americans are considering buying an EV for their next car. And that's led by millennials, the largest generation. And they are also the generation, it just so happens, who are more likely to rent or live in apartments. So the problem with charging infrastructure at multi-unit dwellings is a large hurdle for the industry. Some people say, why don't apartment dwellers just charge at public stations around town? I see them all over the place. And while some do, those are typically early EV adopters, so folks who are really dedicated to owning the EV and excited about it. And while many people in the mainstream hopefully are excited about EVs, we need to make it as easy as possible, as easy as owning an internal combustion engine, a gas vehicle, or even easier to spur that growth. And convenient charging really is one of the keys. So currently the EV industry and the public sector are investing money and time in pretty expensive public charging projects. And at this trajectory, we're going to need a whopping $6 billion investment in order to build enough charging infrastructure. So what we said was there has to be a smarter, cheaper way. So EVmatch's peer-to-peer model of charging opens up private chargers for public use and has the potential to create 20 times more charging infrastructure at a fraction of the cost. So we're applying this peer-to-peer model at multi-unit dwellings as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Danny, and he's going to show you exactly how EVmatch's solution works for multifamily housing. So take it away, Danny.
Awesome. Thanks, William. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through our product a little bit and show you how our solution works really well to fit the many needs of multi-unit dwellings. Okay, so EVmatch works with the building owners and property managers to install as many charging stations as they need, and that's based on the number of EV drivers in the building currently, and also thinking about the future potential number of EVs. So we kind of walk through the process and help building owners and managers find electricians or installation partners like Charlie Charging here, and help manage the project from the very beginning. So in the pictures here, you can see some examples of our commercial installations that use the EVmatch solution in Portland, Oregon, and also Burlington, Vermont. Next slide, please. All right, awesome. So the charger that you saw in those pictures above was the NLX branded juice box. So we've integrated our software with that level 2 charging station. And that's a custom software integration that allows for some additional features beyond the standard reservation and payment processing that are available to any residential charger on the EVmatch network. So the juice box station easily connects to a Wi-Fi network. That way owners can control station access. They can provide accurate pricing to those using it, monitor electricity usage, and have some other access to data reporting functions. Next slide, please. Thanks. All right, yeah, so that Wi-Fi connection piece is actually really important. So instead of using expensive cellular data plans, which a lot of commercial stations rely on, our solution enables multi-unit dwellings to connect their juicebox station to a Wi-Fi network, and you can save some money that way. And overall, you can save a lot of money by using EVmatch. So between the lower hardware costs of the juice box, avoiding expensive cellular plans, and EVmatch's low-cost subscriptions for multifamily housing, hosts on our network can save 30 to 60% compared to other options on the market. Next slide, please. Thanks. All right, so here you can see a little bit what it looks like within the EVmatch app. View of the Denver and Boulder area in Colorado, and what a station might look like when you're viewing it on the app. Once the stations are installed, owners can host them on the app and create a listing, and then hosts have the control over the price that they want to charge to rent out their charging station, and also set hours of availability. So in this example, you can see a price that's set per kilowatt hour, so 24 cents per kilowatt hour, and that the charger is set to be available all day, every day, 24/7. Next slide, please. An additional feature that we've made for multi-unit dwellings is this advanced grouping feature, and that way hosts can customize exactly who has access to their stations. So we built this feature in mind to work for the many different types of use that a charger can have at a multi-unit dwelling. So within the EVmatch app, when you create a listing, you can make as many groups as you want to set how people use their charging station, use your charging station. You can give some users special access, special hours of access, or special pricing, or both. So our platform, once you've done that, takes care of all the logistics so that users can just see when they have access to the charger, and they always get the best price available to them based on the access codes that they've entered to their account. This EVmatch grouping feature also leverages access codes and idle fees as a way to efficiently share chargers among multiple EV drivers that might live at the same building and be sharing a few chargers. And we've built this set of features so that it, although it works super well and was definitely built with multifamily housing in mind, it also works at other commercial locations like co-working spaces or workplaces or lodging destinations like hotels. Next slide, please. All right, so let's take a look at kind of an example of what it would mean to make a group here. As we were building out this feature, we heard from customers that it's important to allow private charging for like just tenants or just owners of a condo at certain times. But we also heard from a good number of hosts that they want to be able to rent the charger out to the public and leverage that peer-to-peer nature of EVmatch to expand charging access to their community. And by doing that, the host can also make some extra money by renting out the charger when tenants or owners might not be using it. So for example, a host could make a tenants group for the chargers that are installed at their building so that the charging stations are available to tenants 24/7 for a kilowatt hour price of 24 cents or whatever price the host might choose. And then if the host only wanted tenants to access the charger, they can make that group private by, on that second screenshot, managing the access codes. So the host can generate access codes there and share them with tenants and see who has entered in the access code and manage who has access to that group. And that way, general users on EVmatch wouldn't be able to see the charger on the map because they haven't entered the code into their account. Another thing we can notice on this edit groups page, the screenshot on the left, is that there's an option for idle fees. So this is a way that building managers or the owner of the charger can kind of efficiently facilitate people sharing a charger. So in case somebody ends up overstaying their welcome and overstaying their reservation that they've made at a charging station, the host can set a fee to be levied on their account for the number of minutes that they overstay their welcome. Similar to what happens at like a Tesla supercharger station if you stay past your time. The host can set like a grace period too, so it doesn't need to be super, it's not a punitive type of thing. You can have a grace period 5 or 10 minutes after your reservation ends, so you have a chance to move your car, but you still have an incentive to move it and not be blocking somebody else. All right, next slide, please. Similarly, in addition to a private group, you can make a public group, like I said, and kind of make that charging station available to the public. And on the EVmatch platform, that just means making a group that doesn't have any private access codes. So you set some group settings, and a host can set availability to a specific time that they, maybe have agreed with all the owners or the tenants that the charger can be available to the public. Like in this example, we could have charging only on the weekends, and the host could choose to set a higher price for members of the public using their charger. So this not only increases public charging options, it also provides a revenue stream so the host can recoup the upfront installation costs of putting in EV chargers. And over time, if the charging needs of the building or the community might change, the host can always edit these settings to match what works best for them. All right, next slide, please. So that's kind of the process of setting up a charging station on the EVmatch platform at a multifamily housing complex. Once the station's operational and you put in those settings, it's really easy. EV drivers can reserve and pay for their charging sessions with just a few quick clicks on our app. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it back to William.
Thanks, Danny. All right, so as you've seen, EVmatch is the charging solution that combines a few things that makes it really attractive. So we have the peer-to-peer charging network, that hosts can take advantage of to earn extra revenue by renting it out to the public. And then also create the smaller subnetworks or the groups so that your tenants or your employees can easily share chargers amongst themselves efficiently. So we're combining that system with affordable smart hardware, the juice box, and then advanced software features, as we've discussed. All of these can help various entities like cities, businesses, and utilities expand charging for both smaller communities, so like one apartment or one workplace, but also expand charging for the general public at the same time. So it's a lower cost option. Multi-unit dwellings are the most logical place for entities to expand charging because home charging is one of the keys to encouraging widespread EV adoption, as we discussed there at the beginning. So our current customers have shown that they can benefit in many ways from the EVmatch solution at multifamily buildings. So obviously you can recoup electricity costs through the EVmatch app. And then you can earn an average of about $1,200 profit per station annually by renting it out to the public and amongst your tenants. And then you can also increase your green reputation to attract more tenants, especially millennials, which, as I said, are a growing base of multi-unit dwelling renters and dwellers. And then also you can earn lead points. So there are many attractive reasons to add charging with EVmatch. So now that you know the technology exists for sharing chargers at multifamily properties, we wanted to share with you a few tips to convincing your property owner, manager, or HOA board, condo association, whoever the governing body is at your multifamily property, that they should add chargers. So here are some things we've learned. First, it's really helpful to conduct a survey. So this can be an online survey. Maybe you use something like SurveyMonkey, or you email it out to folks, or you go door to door, whatever is most comfortable. But gathering that interest and demand so that you can provide that data to your governing body is really effective at convincing them. So we do have evidence that that it does work. Kind of need a critical mass of interest. So here are some questions that some of our other customers have used in their surveys. Some pretty obvious ones. Do you own an EV or plan to buy one in the near future? Would you be more likely to buy an EV if you had chargers installed at your building? And then last but not least, would you be willing to pay for electricity to charge your EV? Because that last one's obviously very important to property managers and property owners so that they're not covering the costs for other folks to fuel their vehicles. And we've already mentioned, obviously, that EVmatch makes that possible with our payment processing function. One thing I wanted to note as well with surveys is they can be used in a bunch of other applications like workplaces. So you can convince the powers that be that add charging and that it makes a lot of sense. So it's just a great tool. Second is to talk to your property manager or HOA board about installing the chargers. So at EVmatch.com, we already have an email written for you. So you could edit it, copy it, and then send it out to your property manager. And you can then include, along with it, the results of your survey to make your pitch more compelling. And of course, we're happy to help you along the way with this. So be sure to contact us. I've put the website URL there at the bottom. That's where you can find this email to copy and paste and send out to your HOA board or your property manager. This is also a place you can contact us to get our assistance. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Alex so he can describe more about how Charlie charging works.
Excellent. Thank you, William and Danny, for giving such a great introduction. As a lot of folks probably realize by now, this is not the most straightforward process, installing an electric vehicle charging station. And that is a big thing that, inspired founding of Charlie Charging. We need more charging infrastructure wherever cars live, and that is why we set out to create something simple, accessible, sustainable, and affordable that doesn't add a significant hurdle to most folks getting an electric vehicle. Which, if you advance to the next slide, we're sort of in an interesting crossroads, not to mention the current events that have all changed our lifestyles. We see increasing battery power, increasing battery range, and decreasing battery costs, driving technological advances in electric vehicles, making them more viable for everybody, as well as the daily vehicle miles traveled for the average American especially is significantly lower than it has been in months and years past. And the combination of these two events make EVs more viable than ever, in that most people's daily driving needs can be satisfied as long as they have reliable access to a charging station, either at their home or near their home, because in a lot of places right now, it's discouraged to go venture out into the public to find a charging station, so unless necessary. So we are trying to figure out how to get more EVs into MUDs to accommodate this. But as you might be able to tell by now, there are a significant number of barriers and considerations to actually get through before you can install an electric vehicle charging station. So next slide, please. So here are the main things that any multi-unit dwelling needs to consider when installing an electric vehicle charging station. The most significant barrier, of course, is going to be upfront costs, because this equipment is not cheap. The equipment can range from $500 for a dumb charger to $1,500 for the juice box commercial, smart charger that EVmatch and Charlie use for our commercial properties and office properties, et cetera, that we have installed already, plus the installation of said equipment, which in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, where we're based, we have about a $5,000 average per unit installation cost for a level 2 charger that you could expect, which is not cheap, but it is possible to get that number down through rebates, incentives, and creative solutions that Charlie has developed in conjunction with creative vendors here in Portland to reduce the costs of equipment and installation and get over this essential barrier. Now, pretending that we can get over that easily, the next thing to figure out is access management, which brings in a whole bunch of other questions. How do you want this charging station to be used? Do you want it to be used by tenants, by the public, by some combination of both? And do you want that station to be networked or non-networked? Do you want to be able to use a software like EVmatch to facilitate, optimal use of that charging station? Or do you want it to be a quote unquote dumb charger that anyone in the public or anyone with physical access to that charger can come in and plug in and, set your electricity at whatever rate that they're charging? So that's something that you want to consider, and that's very regionally dependent. Here in Oregon, we have really cheap electricity, typically 11 cents or less per kilowatt hour. But we have, other regions around the country with significantly higher rates that would be untenable for somebody to just be allowing anyone from the public to be able to use that charging station without recouping the costs. So you have to think about all these considerations. And then the last thing, of course, is sort of, reiterating who pays for what. Who pays for the electricity, who pays for the equipment and the installation, who pays for maintenance in case any maintenance is needed with the charging station, and who pays for the software and networking capabilities if that is something that is desired. So all of these tensions need to be addressed before there could be a clear path forward for installing a charging station, which is why Charlie created its turnkey service package the way we hoped that it would address these barriers as efficiently as possible. So I'll walk you through some of our value proposition here, but I'm going to just breeze through it, and feel free to follow up after the webinar. We have our contact information or in the Q&A session. But here, I'll read you here our summary here. We start with $0 upfront for charging equipment, which lowers the financial barrier to our host properties. And then we work with our host properties to secure installation rebates, either from utilities, government funding programs, or even we offer our own incentives for installing longer-term contracts. And then we provide highly customized EV charging services on the back end in order to make it so that EV charging station is used in the way that it was intended to be used, and whether that's with networking or without networking, or with EVmatch. That is up to the property, and it is completely property dependent, and we work with our host properties to define what is the best value. And all software, maintenance, and additional services that might come up, like 24/7 driver assistance, is bundled into a flat monthly fee starting at $79 per month per port. So if you are a property manager, this service plan could be particularly attractive because it makes it as simple and straightforward to install an EV charging station as it might be to bring in a vending machine or an ice maker that you're not familiar with, how that service works. But we see this everywhere. So we want to make things as simple as possible, but we also offer these services to individuals who are trying to bring charging to their multi-unit dwellings or even their households. Essentially, we can help you install a charging station and take care of all of the considerations for a single monthly per port fee. And the price, here is for commercial, but it's slightly different for residential. And so please contact us if you have any questions. And with that, I want to announce and publicize an exciting new partnership that we have with EVmatch. We are launching a growing number of charging stations on EVmatch's peer-to-peer charging network. And personally, I believe that EVmatch is the most optimal solution for multi-unit dwellings with shared EV charging infrastructure, given that it can be customized so specifically to specific groups, as Danny had mentioned, but also specific pricing structures, even by the hour or for certain schedules, to sort of reflect time of use rates and align the incentives in using that charging station, which in the best way for everybody, so that it is being used optimally as much as possible, but also as affordably as possible and as most cost effectively as possible. So our whole goal is to bring more charging stations to you, installing charging stations wherever cars live, so that EVs can become a viable solution for everybody, not just the folks who are early adopters, not just the folks who happen to have an outlet next to their car, but also the folks out there, the garage orphans, as Danny mentioned, who don't have reliable access to a charging station from their parking lot. So if you are interested at all, please contact our sales team, and we would be happy to discuss installing a charging station for you.
Great. Thanks, Alex. We'll share his contact information on the last slide, along with ours. So I just have a couple more slides here, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So get your questions in by clicking that Ask a Question button at the bottom. Here are some great resources. Again, like past webinars, we will send this presentation out to all of the attendees, so you can use it for reference and click these links to find some of our favorite resources. So on the charging rebates and incentives side, Plug in America has a great tool that lists incentives broken down by state. So that's extremely useful since we all don't live in California. And then there's also the federal EV charging tax credit that has been extended through 2020. So you can get a tax credit of 30% of the cost of your installation, up to $1,000 if it's residential, and up to $30,000 for commercial public charging. So take a look at that. excuse me, on the right side, we have some useful websites and apps. Obviously, EVmatch. Download that free app if you haven't yet, so you can access more charging or host your own station. NLX, as we mentioned, they are the ones that make the juice box. So if you're in the market for a new level 2 station, residential or commercial, you can take a look there. Charlie Charging, here's a link to their website. Want to thank Alex again for presenting and for offering their great service to really lower the barriers to installing charging at commercial locations and multifamily locations. So take a look there and contact their team if you have any questions. We also pulled this from the Plug in America website, the California MUD, so multi-unit dwelling permitting guide. So if you do live in California and you're interested in really what it takes to get some chargers installed at your multi-unit dwelling, that's a great place to start to look at what you need to do. The last two are platforms where you can access more charging. So the Department of Energy's Alternative Fuels Locator app and then the PlugShare app, both obviously very useful to find more charging. All right, so I'll show you one last time. That's where the Ask a Question button is. So if you have any other questions, get them in. And here's our contact information. I'm going to go ahead and leave this page up while the three of us are going to share our screens and take on the Q&A session.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so I'm going to MC this section. We've received a number of questions, which is great. We'll direct them to the different guest speakers, or if you want to chime in, feel free. So the first question is, what method do you have to coordinate charging with residents of a large building? Somebody said the fancy place they're staying has 2 chargers, but it's frustrating when someone bogarts the station with disregard for others. And often they're left plugged in because of convenient parking space. So obviously, yeah, this is definitely one of the solutions we're trying to solve. So Danny, do you want to talk a little bit about how EVmatch can help?
Yeah, totally. I love this question. And yeah, it's something that we definitely kept in mind as we built out this grouping feature, because it's obviously going to be the case for a while, and for most people, that if there is EV charging at your building, it's likely that there's more drivers than there are places to charge. So you need a system really for figuring out how to effectively and efficiently share those chargers, and how to kind of deal with somebody that might be overstaying their welcome or something like that. So yeah, I mean, a lot of other competitors or other charging networks, they kind of structure their system around like a queuing system. And so if there's an app, then you get told when it's your turn to come in line. But a lot of times in our experience, that doesn't work out very well, and you don't really know when you might be able to charge, and you're kind of waiting around on it. So that's why EVmatch, like at its core, is based around having a reservation system. So you have a set time that you've paid for, that you're allowed to start charging, and when your charging session is going to end and when you need to move your charger. So our system notifies you, when your charging session is going to end and when you need to move your car. The logistics of figuring out when you can charge is all handled on our end. So when you're the driver, you just check what times you would like to charge, and you can see whether or not somebody else has reserved it, or if those are within the hours of availability. So that helps to kind of address those things kind of at their root, that you're just making a reservation for a specific time. But even so, you got to excuse the train that's going by. Even so, if somebody is overstaying their welcome, as I mentioned, we have an idle fee system, kind of similar to what happens at a Tesla supercharger, where if you've reached a certain level of charge and you're still taking up a space, if there's other people there, you start to get charged a fee for like every minute that you overstay your welcome. And so That's up to the host to set. If nobody at the building wants idle fees, then they don't have to turn that on. But if it becomes a problem or the host wants to do it from the outset, they can choose what that fee is that somebody is going to pay for overstaying their welcome. And they can choose kind of how long that grace period is after the reservation you've made is over before that fee starts to be charged.
Great. Yeah, and I'll just emphasize, obviously, that that's certainly one of the biggest problems we're trying to solve with our solution. So appreciate that question. If you have further follow-up questions on that, feel free to reach out, of course. Here's another question, maybe for you, Danny. Do you have tips for getting a Wi-Fi signal to reach your driveway or garage? Or it could be to reach the designated EV charging parking spaces at your multifamily building or your office building, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. So this is definitely something that varies a lot, on a case-by-case basis. We definitely think that Wi-Fi is the way to go to keep your chargers networked and, enable these features of, reservation management and access control and things like that. Depending on where your charger is, you could just have, and depending on how your building handles, if there's like a common area Wi-Fi or something like that, that could be, within the reach of the charging station. But if that doesn't happen, then there's other things that you can do to kind of help that out. And that, it might just be out of the range of that shared Wi-Fi or down in a garage or something like that. So there's different kind of hardware that you can take to extend any sort of Wi-Fi that you have. There's they call them bridges or repeaters to kind of boost the signal of your Wi-Fi. And then that way the charger can have like a stronger connection to the central Wi-Fi that it's using. And another, if that isn't true, like if the building doesn't have any Wi-Fi, or it's not feasible to install a bridge or something like that to boost the signal, then you can always install like a cellular data mobile hotspot. And those are available pretty cheaply if you just get one little device, because that's the good thing about the Wi-Fi connection on these chargers is they don't require a lot of data. They just kind of need to be online and report a little bit of data back and forth. So that it's not like it needs to be a lot of data going back and forth. And if you don't have any options for existing Wi-Fi, you can always get a cellular device and put that in a place close to the charger to allow it to stay connected.
Yeah, and if I could hop in here, I'm not sponsored by TP-Link, but I should be, because I bought a million of these things, which is called a Wi-Fi access point. And if you get something that is power over Ethernet, then you can essentially extend Wi-Fi out to whatever length of Ethernet cable that you can run from a modem, which is where you get internet from, to a garage. And I've used this thing multiple times to network EVmatch charging stations at different properties. And that unit, I think, costs like $60. And that is something that comes standard with Charlie services, is we are responsible for bringing the networking out to that charging station and helping you figure out that sort of last step that necessarily, you might not necessarily have thought that you needed outside of, power. So we help you do that. And if that's truly impossible, like if the charging station's in the middle of the woods or something, Charlie even has a Bluetooth enabled solution. So while it would not be accessible via EVmatch, it would be possible to install a charging station, 10 floors underground with Charlie services.
Great. Thanks, guys. All right, so the next question is a little bit more about the EVmatch app. So does the EVmatch app and the map within it connect with PlugShare so that an EV driver can go to one place for all charging stations? Do you want to touch on this a little, Danny?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, that's not something that happens in an automated way. It's something that we're working on. But what we do is add all of those stations that are listed publicly on EVmatch to PlugShare. And that way, if PlugShare is your preferred method of of finding out where you can charge. You can still see those show up on the map, and those pins just direct you to EVmatch so that you can get directed to the app and set up your account on EVmatch and then make a reservation that way. So we kind of keep that as another way that people can find out about stations on the EVmatch network.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as I did on the resources page, that hosts can also list their station on the Department of Energy's alternative fuels station locator tool. So it's just on their website. And again, the link will be in this presentation that we'll email out to everyone. So just another way to cross-list it even further. All right, the next question is about the grouping feature that Danny described in some detail. And someone asked if the tenant group codes that are used for access could get out into the wild and shared with folks who they weren't intended for. So do you want to touch on this, Danny?
Yeah, sure. This was definitely something that we kept close in mind as we were building this out. So yeah, I mean, obviously, there's not much that we could do on our end to keep somebody from tweeting the access code out to millions of people. But the good thing is that as a host, you can view who has access to the charger that way. So if you look at that group's access, you can see all of the different access codes that you've generated, and you can see which EVmatch user accounts have entered in that code. So it gives a lot of flexibility to the host, so that if you just wanted to have one code and didn't want to deal with the administration, you could just have one code and share it with people. And you can always turn off the code or delete it or make a new one if it turns out that a code is compromised, and you see somebody that is obviously not a tenant that has entered in the code. You would see that from your host account. And then the other part of the flexibility there is that if a host wanted to create an access code, which is a little preferable for each tenant or each person that was getting that special access, they could do that and just have one code per person and make sure that it stayed that way. And if it ever changed, then you could just delete that access code or turn it off.
Great. Yeah, and I shared the slide that actually shows.
Oh, great. Yeah.
The group access code. So I don't know if you wanted to just talk about it with the visual there with my name and email.
Yeah, totally. So hopefully you can see that all right on the screen. But on that second screenshot is the access codes menu. So you can make a bunch of access codes, just generate one with the click of a button. And then the example there is one code that's on, and you can see, yeah, in this example, it was William's account that's entered in that code. So you can see anybody that's entered the code, and if anything is fishy, you can just turn it off and make a new one, basically.
Great. All right, next question. Which EVSE, so which type of charger models can the EVmatch platform be integrated with? And I can answer this one. So currently we're enabled with the JuiceNet stations. So we're integrated with the NLX juice box, as we mentioned, but also with the Clipper Creek JuiceNet edition and the AeroVironment, now owned by Webasto, JuiceNet edition as well. But we're also planning to add new Wi-Fi enabled stations this year that leverage the OCPP communications, and so the open charge point protocol, right? So right now we have that kind of limited list, but we're working on expanding. But most of our customers certainly like the juice box, and that's what most go with, and they prefer typically, and it does well in many different scenarios, both in your garage or in your driveway or in a commercial setting. So, all right, next question. Is there a concern that most of the condo spaces are in a secure area? Do you want to touch on this at all, Danny?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so sometimes a parking space can be, behind a gate or something like that in a way that's not accessible by the general public. And maybe I'll answer kind of that part. And if the question's about like shared versus deeded parking, maybe William, you can talk about that.
Sure.
But in the case that it's like behind a gate, then that can be something that you include in the listing as a way to still have the option of having that charger be available to the public. And the way that we handle that is that you have some public description information that shows like on the map when you click on a listing, but there can be additional information that only is released to a user once they've made a reservation and have permission to use the charger. So once you've made the reservation, you can see that information, and it's included like in an email as well that gets sent to you. So if there's a gate code or something that you need to do to get access to the charger, or some information about where it's located, that can be included in a private way that limits it to only the people that have permission to use the charger.
Yeah, and so in many ways, the solution we've described is sort of predicated on the idea that the parking space is a shared parking space. But obviously that's not always the case, especially in condos. So if you have a deeded parking space or a dedicated space, maybe it's in a carport, something like that. The first thing to know is that the EVmatch software can work even if it's not in a public sharing setting. So if you want to install charging and your HOA board or your condo association wants to recoup the cost of electricity, our solution, even in a deeded space, makes a lot of sense because we ensure that you're paying for electricity and that your HOA is not. So it works there. Additionally, if you have a dedicated parking space, a deeded space, and you install charging, you would then have the option to share it as well. And since we have the payment processing built in, we wouldn't expect that would be a problem with your property because they're being recouped the cost of electricity and whatever markup that they've included. So in either the shared parking scenario or the deeded parking scenario, the EVmatch software would work.
Can I add one more thing to that? Yeah, just that if you did have your own parking space and you were choosing to make it available to the public, that's kind of a nice place where the grouping feature can function as well. You could have a private group that's just for you to set aside times that you want to be able to charge, so that only you can possibly charge during that time, and nobody's going to take your spot when you want it. But also choose the times that you want it to be available to other people. So it's kind of a nice application of that.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Someone asked, is support possible for various EV model charging compatibility? For example, Tesla versus CHAdeMO, etc. So CHAdeMO and CCS are only for level 3 charging, and right now we're supporting level 2 charging with the J1772 ports. So that's the kind of the universal J plug, and Tesla drivers also can use an adapter for the J plug, so it works for everyone. So that's what we're leveraging, so that it's as accessible for as many EV drivers as possible. So next question, can someone explain why the Wi-Fi connection is necessary with the charging station and how that would be set up in a multi-unit dwelling? Whose Wi-Fi is being used? All right, this is a great question. Do you want to touch on it first, Danny, and then I could hop on?
Yeah, sure. So I think we touched a little bit on how it would be set up. So if there's a common area Wi-Fi that reaches, you could add the chargers onto that Wi-Fi, or use one of the like a repeater, or like Alex mentioned, another way to extend that signal. If that's not possible, you can always use a mobile hotspot as well. But as to why the Wi-Fi connection is necessary, that's what enables the EVmatch software to kind of be managing who has access to the charging station. So, so our software talks with the hardware there and makes sure that the charger is only supplying electricity for somebody that has made a reservation and during a proper time and has paid for it and has actually gone and started their reservation. So all of that has to be happening, through some internet communication between the person who's using the app on their phone or whatever and the hardware itself. It's possible always, of course, to just have, like Alex said, a dumb charger that's not networked, and you can just plug in and go. But once you have it connected to the internet, you can enable that access control functionality and the idle fees and the grouping and payment processing that EVmatch helps out with.
Yeah, and so to the second question, whose Wi-Fi is being used? The common building Wi-Fi should be used. It shouldn't be an individual unit's Wi-Fi. So either maybe you have a clubhouse and that has Wi-Fi, so you can access that, or maybe your building would have to add Wi-Fi. But again, it's a pretty low cost barrier for that connection, and it is really what opens up all of the features available through EVmatch, with the payment processing and the booking and scheduling, all this stuff that's pretty important for a multifamily property who have many tenants with competing schedules and need to charge. You could try using a dumb charger and kind of go back to the old school way of haggling over the charger, but our solution is really aimed toward efficient use of it and easy use so that everyone is happy and able to charge.
Yeah, if I could just hop in, I think that Charlie, can sort of add a layer of customization where in situations where it doesn't make sense to, like, I agree with William that wherever possible, we should utilize the shared infrastructure, like a Wi-Fi modem that's in the office or something, if at all possible. But in places where that isn't possible, like my own multi-unit dwelling where I live, I have to use my own Wi-Fi service and repeat it down in the garage area. And Charlie is able to provide that extra layer of sort of service to make sure that that handoff is facilitated from one tenant to another, because it's a minimally invasive, sort of Ethernet port use to extend the Wi-Fi with a piece of equipment like this, access point. So it shouldn't be any additional cost to whoever has the Wi-Fi service to extend that Wi-Fi. It's just a transitional period that you might have to account for, and that's why Charlie exists, because we want to be able to mitigate those risks. And EVmatch makes it possible because we can just cut and paste their software into any JuiceNet enabled Wi-Fi or charging station. But Charlie is here to help you cross that gap, that extra little hurdle with the Wi-Fi.
Great, awesome. All right, so we've just got about a minute left. A couple more questions, so I might try to compress them down. But somebody asked said many building owners don't care about being perceived as green and won't make any changes unless they believe it will increase property value or allow them to charge a higher rent or increase tenant retention. So is there data that people can reference that makes one of these three cases? So whether it increases property value, whether it allows them to charge higher rent, or whether it increases tenant retention.
Great question.
So, yeah, you want to touch on that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I'm about to hire an intern to help me answer those questions this summer. But the long story short that I can give you without a significant amount of data to fall back on is sort of what William alluded to, which is that people, millennials, my generation, those folks are going to more and more make purchasing decisions based upon, accessibility to the green things that they want. So I don't necessarily, I just made this decision actually this last week to renew my lease in my current apartment because I have invested in a charging station. That was one of my main reasons for making that purchasing decision for the next year of my life. So I'm just an anecdote, but there are more and more folks like me who, especially after they have already bought an EV and don't want to go back to a non-EV, they're only going to be able to live places where there are charging stations. And we're already seeing big companies, big big tech companies, especially that have a lot of money, who I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name them at this point, but they are making purchasing and leasing decisions themselves based upon whether or not their office buildings have EV charging. And so we're putting in EV charging in advance of them moving in multiple, like a few months from now. So, I mean, the signals in the market are already there, and that the demand is influencing purchasing decisions. At this point, it's a little bit ambiguous how much dollars per square foot, or, you know, the additional percentage of value that someone can achieve from having a charging station. But it can be sort of a deal breaker for people who do have an EV if you don't have a charging station. So we're sort of, it's a work in progress, but I think the indicators are positive in that it's better to have a charging station for an economic and sales, you know, value perspective than anything.
Yeah, and I'll just reemphasize kind of what we've said a couple times before, is that so conducting surveys in your own multi-unit dwelling community is going to be the best possible data you can present to the property owner or manager, because it's what their actual tenants want or don't want. And typically, you know, the EV drivers are pretty high value tenants. So making them happy oftentimes makes sense. And as more and more people do buy electric cars, there will be a growing base that values that. So, you know, there's kind of an obvious logical case to make that it certainly does increase tenant retention if those tenants have electric cars. So that's kind of the first thing you want to look at. It is a little bit of the chicken and the eggs scenario. You know, it would be great if property owners wanted to improve their green reputation and add charging before the EV drivers in their building exist. But from what we've seen, it kind of flows the other way. With the EV drivers, the charging will come. So using that survey, leveraging that can, from a firsthand perspective, really sway property owners and managers. And then I will just mention that there is some data showing that millennials value home EV charging and include this amenity and want this as an amenity in their apartment. So we can share that study with you if we can find it. And the last thing I wanted to say quickly, because we're out of time, but I didn't want to mislead anyone, was someone I think thought that that I may have said that millennials are the demographic buying the most EVs, but it's actually, I was saying millennials are the largest generation yet. So there's interest among building and tenants, or building owners and property owners, to install charging to serve them. That's not to say that right now they're the biggest EV purchasers. So, all right, great. Well, Alex, Danny, do you have any last things to add?
No, I just appreciated all the questions. It was really great to hear the input from everybody that joined today. I hope this was informative, and you all can go out there and get your HOA to install some charging.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you to EVmatch for having me on this webinar. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for joining. Thanks, Danny. Again, our contact information was on that last slide. Visit our websites if you want to contact us, or just directly send us some emails. We look forward to helping you with your next EV charging project, hopefully at a multi-family property. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.